What if the biggest thing holding you back is not your job, it's not your boss, nor is it your workload? If your first response to change is, we don't need change, then this episode is for you. Because sometimes the excuses that we think are protecting us are actually hindering our growth. Today, we are unpacking what resistance really costs us and what we can do to move past it. Thank you for joining me today at Crossroads and Catalyst, the podcast with Shanita B. I am your host. This is where we discuss the thoughtful, wise, and strategic perspective at a crossroads can be the catalyst for change. I, like many of you, do not like change for the sake of it. We want it to be meaningful and impactful, and we also want to be included in the process of change and providing some feedback, voicing our opinions and concerns, whatever the case may be. We want to be a part of that. But that's not always the case. But for some of you, as you're climbing the corporate ladder or building your businesses, you recognize that change is going to come along with the landscape. And how you respond to change in those moments can be telling for how far you might be able to go within a certain organization. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about that, because change is all around us, and we have to really hone in how we respond and how we express our satisfaction or dissatisfaction when change is presented to us. I can tell you that even from my own perspective, when I was younger, fresh college grad and had my first couple of jobs, it was a different experience because you're relying upon other people to train you and show you how to perform different processes and follow protocols and so on. And of course, the question gets asked at some point along the way, well, why do you do things like this? Well, the response is, well, that's how I was taught. Or you hear, we've always done it like that. And that's not often a satisfactory response. But part of the reason why the questions are being asked is because someone is taking the time to evaluate and assess what needs to happen to optimize processes and make them more efficient. We don't want to do it just for the sake uh, of doing it again, but we do want things to be better. And if you can contribute to that in a meaningful way, you want to take advantage of that when it's presented to you. I can tell you that uh, years ago, when I had taken a job, part of the job that I was to do was to do some assessments and some evaluations. And I was specifically asked by the department head in this particular department to do that very function. And I did, and I tried to approach it as gingerly as possible, just asking some questions, making sure that I didn't approach it in a threatening manner. But anytime you do that, when you're asking people about their job, why they do particular functions in the manner that they complete them, people are intimidated, people feel threatened, and they don't like it. And that is what happened in this scenario. Didn't matter how kind or nice I was. Um, this person thought that I was overstepping my bounds. So she complained. And the result of that is I had to explain to this person, or to their boss, rather, the person who asked me, okay, this is what happened. This is the kind of questions that I'm asking, just following through on what it is that you asked me to do. No big deal. But it took a while for this person to get used to me because, again, I'm the new person coming in. Nobody wants the new person coming in sniffing around their tree if they can help it. And of course, there could be a number of reasons as to why that happens. People are uncomfortable. Again, they feel threatened, or maybe they're hiding something. I don't think that that was the situation with this particular person, but nonetheless, that is what came up. She was resistant to change, while her boss may have been more open to it. I personally have an I have an inclination toward changing things because my thing is there has to be a better way to do this. Because if I'm doing it, I'm constantly trying to figure out a way to save myself some time and to make it better. And if I'm evaluating someone else's processes, I'm certainly asking those same questions that might potentially cause them to think, oh, well, if they take this away from me, I won't have anything to do. Believe me, in most organizations, there is way more work than there are people to complete tasks. So it behooves us to try to do them in a much more efficient way as possible so that we can maximize people's time and their skill sets. So I want us to look at some things that will help us to recognize resistance and what that looks like. So here are some common responses, and you'll hear this, and I already gave you one. Well, we've always done it like that. That's a common response. And you want to try to stay away from that when someone asks, why do you do that? There has to be a reason why. So try to get to the reason why you're doing it as opposed to the length of time that it's been completed in that way. Okay, so here's one. Someone asks or someone makes a recommendation that we might need to change a system or a process. And they respond with, well, there's a workaround for that. That is not a satisfactory response. If you're trying to get into leadership, you definitely just you don't want to throw that out as a bone to try to throw off the scent and keep people from poking around any further. Really, what you want to do is you want to evaluate what the workaround is actually doing. Is it actually helping or is it making it worse? Is it covering up a bigger flaw in the process or the system? And are you tolerating dysfunction just to avoid discomfort? And specifically, if you're already in a leadership position, if you are satisfied with a workaround, you have to ask yourself, how significant is this process to our overall operations? Because one workaround might be okay. But if it's, five, six, 10 plus workarounds, everything that you do has a workaround for it, well, now you have a problem. So you want to avoid that if at all possible. Here's another response that you might recognize as resistance. Well, it's working fine. Is it really working fine? Is that true, or is that just an easy out? And how do you know that it's working fine? Are you able to validate that it's working fine? You really don't want to rely upon other people telling you that it's working fine. And if the sole, I guess, if the sole purpose of saying that is because you're relying upon one or two people that are conveying that information, well, have you talked to anybody else who works with them or below them under their leadership that can clarify if it's actually working the way that it's intended? Or maybe it can't work that way because it doesn't have that functionality. My point is, this is just one other phrase that people have uttered, for a really long time, just to kind of put that barrier up and say, yeah, we don't need the change. It's working just fine the way that it is. Okay, so then what about um, this response? Well, we just changed it not too long ago. So we don't really want to go down the path of changing it again. That's just too much change in a short period of time. Well, are you protecting your ego more than the outcomes? This is a really important question because a lot of organizations have to consider how they're spending their money and what they've spent their money on. And I get it because some things can be pretty significant in cost, especially if you're talking about making some recommendations to overhaul systems, processes, which may impact staff. All of those things are extremely important, and I totally get it. But is that really an excuse to not move forward with changing something that is broken, and it is broken in a really significant way? I was sharing with some friends recently, some things that are going on and some things that I've experienced. And one of the things that we talked about is when it comes down to making changes and whether or not to proceed with making a major change, if in fact a lot of money has been spent to implement something that we recognize now is not working. And this was the response that one of them gave, and which I thought was pretty funny. She likened it to buying a loaf of bread, and you get it, and then you discover that this loaf of bread is molded. But because you've already spent the money and you're not willing to change it, well, now you're going to make everybody suffer through it, and now everybody has to finish this molded loaf of bread because we're not going to replace it until that's gone. Well, everybody's still hungry. And that might sound kind of silly, but it kind of drove the point home. But I'll give you another example. What about mistakes, serious mistakes that take place in hospitals on a pretty regular basis, unfortunately, where people have been cut or had surgeries performed on the wrong sites. Well, the fact that they had a surgery performed on the wrong site did not alleviate the fact that they still had problem in the first place. So instead of the right leg, the surgery was performed on the left, but there's still a problem with the right leg. It still has to be addressed. And that's similar to purchasing or having the open mindedness to see that because something was done even just a few years ago and maybe a significant amount of money was spent, we still have the problem. It may have in fact made the problem worse. Maybe there wasn't enough information that was available at the time that the decision was made. Maybe it was made for the convenience of some and not for all. There are a variety of reasons as to why decisions are made at the time that they are. But when you recognize that it was not a good decision, we have to own it. And then we have to decide, what are we going to do to move forward? What are we going to get out of changing and moving to something that is actually going to fit with the needs of the organization? And how you respond to those things is going to be very telling about you and your leadership. And if you're trying to get into leadership, it may prevent you from being considered for more responsibility as a leader because of that very reason. That what that means is that you're not interested in being accountable and responsible for the decisions that have been made. And when it comes to dollars already spent, those are sunk costs. You're not going to get that money back. But if you are bent on having people limp around and just continue to drag themselves and use a process that doesn't work, you're hindering their growth, you're hindering your growth, and you're hindering the growth of the organization, which might put everyone in a position of damage and is not good for anybody along that course. Okay, so then what does it cost us to resist? If you're not open to change, and that's just a few examples. I'm sure many of you can think of different things that you have heard people say, excuses that they have put forth as a reason as to why they will not change, why the change is not necessary. Well, a couple of things here. If you're continuing to resist change, people become demoralized because the changes are brought forward because people have ideas about how to do things differently and how to do them better. Most of us, when we show up to work, it's because we want to do a good job and we want to do things in a way that helps to maximize our time. Most of us are just not interested in just showing up to work and being bored all day. Okay. So then it also erodes trust. People don't trust you if they find that what they're bringing to you, you're always chopping it up and finding a reason as to not move forward. And then finally, nobody is going to innovate. They're going to keep their ideas to themselves if they have any at all. And this notion that we've always done it like this, well, we're stuck doing processes in some companies from decades ago because no one is interested in changing. No one wants to move forward, which is definitely not the place where you want to be. So I want to talk about some signs that you are actually at a crossroads. Okay, so number one, you're defending the status quo. You just don't want to change. So, this has been working. We have some fixes for it. Well, if it's time consuming, that's a problem. Or it's difficult. Or it's both, which is really a challenge. So not only for yourself, but for your team. And you might not even be considering how it's impacting other people around you because you're resistant. You may not be, I guess, the person in the priority. It may be that other people are going to be more impacted by this, but because maybe your name was on it, maybe you were the one who created the process or the protocol or the system, and you're just resistant because you like having um, everyone come to you to question it or to get responses, whatever the case may be. Okay, so number two, people stop bringing you new ideas. So, like I just mentioned, people stop innovating. But beyond that, even if they're continuing to innovate, they're doing it at a micro level. They recognize that they can't change the macro. So they're just not going to even bring anything to you because they know that you're going to shoot it down. Why would anybody have a discussion with you when all you do is pick things apart? And I'm not talking about scenarios where you're playing the devil's advocate or really trying to be that person who's the contrarian to cause everyone to think about why this would or would not be a good idea. I'm talking specifically about being all out resistant to wanting to change things to make it better because personally, well, you might just not like it. And then if they stop bringing you new ideas, okay, if you're not the leader and you're not the one who actually has the authority, you might find that people are just going to, those who are in authority, they're going to make the changes and you're just going to be stuck with it. Especially, this is, I think, even more difficult if after you were asked to provide your insight and you were just wholly resistant to change, that now you're stuck with it. Whereas you missed an opportunity to offer your not only your concerns, but maybe some good feedback that could have been built into whatever the process or the system is planned to be. And if you are the leader and the decision rests with you and you're still resistant to change, well, then again, it goes back to the demoralized team. You're going to have lower engagement and it might result in poor operations and financial results for your organization. We cannot stay stagnant. We cannot remain stagnant. Look at all of the large corporations that have filed bankruptcy and have gone out of business as a result of not wanting to change. Kodak. Kodak was one of the biggest photography companies probably in the world, and you barely hear their name anymore. Blockbuster. Half of the people around don't even know what Blockbuster is, uh, which is a shame because it was the largest, one of the largest video um, companies, rental companies in the world. And because they were resistant to change, they didn't believe that something was coming along. They didn't believe that their competitors were going to be able to rise to the level that they did. All of these things demonstrate the lack of ability to discern and the lack of the ability to change and be agile when it was necessary. So you put everyone in I don't even really know the word that I want to say. You put everyone at a disservice when you resist change. And if you want to be a leader, it is in my opinion the two are contrary to one another. It is an oxymoron to say that there's a leader who does not want to change because a leader by definition is a visionary who brings change. So consider that carefully. Number three, you get offended at the suggestion of a change. Let me reiterate for you, the change is not about you. It is about what is good, not only for your colleagues and or your team, but for the organization. We have to be moving forward. If you're not growing, you're dying. So change is inevitable. Be one who accepts and maybe even embraces the change and see what good that you can find in it. And be someone who conveys to others that you are open and well, you're open minded to what change might be presented. And then number four, again, of the signs that you're at a crossroads, you feel stuck, but you don't want to change your approach. Well, this is definitely a really big problem because if you know that you're stuck, you can't move forward, but you're unwilling to change how you approach. Well, that just kind of is self-evident that you're resistant to change. Your resistance is going to keep you stuck. And that's just the plain fact. If you are not interested in embracing something different and enacting something different, it's going to be problematic for you. So you just consider those four things and where you are. And now we're going to talk about what you can do about it because I really want you to shift how you think about change and be willing to embrace it. And it is a hard thing. Change is a hard thing. I think in a lot of the jobs that I've had, especially as a leader at whatever level, changing people's processes is a challenge. And it is even more challenging to change the way that they think. I have worked with people who have told me outright that they do not like change. And not only do they not like change, you can see it in their faces, you can hear it in the way that they express it. They are they don't want to be a part of it. And they would rather just do their spreadsheets the old fashioned way or pull out their pen and paper and get it done that way. And my thought was, and what I've said is, no, I'm sorry, we can't continue to do that. I want you to give me your feedback. I want you to tell me all of the elements that we need, but we have to work out a process that is going to make it better, because other people are overloaded, because some processes and some people will not change, or not some process, some people will not change because they refuse to change, and it impacts other people's work. It slows it down. And so when you have other people who are coming into departments and into organizations, and they have better ways of doing things, and they're put up, they have the hands put up to them and the stop signs and the stop sticks thrown out. Well, now we really have a problem, because not only do you have people who are going to be demoralized, you might potentially have some retention issues, because people who are really smart and really good at their jobs and want to do things in a way that is helpful not only to themselves but to other people, they're not going to stick around to do things that were done 20, 30 years ago. They want to keep up with some of the latest and the greatest technology and apply that. And I think most people understand that sometimes that finances impact how quickly we might be able to move toward using technology and the latest and the greatest. But if we're still doing things, like I said, from decades ago, well, now you know you have a problem. Okay, so then ask yourself this: why am I taking this personally? Why are you taking it personally? Is it about you? Well, we mentioned earlier that it's not about you. The change is not about you. Now, it should go without saying, all circumstances, everyone's circumstances are going to be slightly different, and the dynamic of people that you work with is going to shed a little bit more light and maybe some slight nuances as to what the answers to these questions are going to be. But you still need to ask the questions. And it's still, at the end of it, it's not about you. Change is inevitable. It happens to all of us. We can go the hard way or we can go the easy way. Okay, so then here's another tip: be curious and not defensive. Ask questions. If someone has sought out your thoughts and your opinions, share them honestly, be tactful, but be engaging and ask questions, because it shouldn't simply come down to your convenience. If there's going to be change, yes, if there's a possibility that it can be made easier for you and or your team, if you're leading a team, that's great. We don't want to make it more difficult, but go in with an open mind to ask questions and see what you can get out of it, and also what you can offer and contribute to to the situation. Okay, and then another tip: collaborate with people. Don't do things in isolation. If you're open to dialoguing with people, you might find that the change that's being presented may turn out to be a lot better than what you originally anticipated. So then, how are we going to turn this into growth? Okay, well, recognize number one, um, that resistance is not necessarily a red flag. Well, it is a red flag. I'm sorry, it is a red flag, but it doesn't mean that it's a character flaw. Now, there are all kind of nuances with our personalities. That's not what we're getting into at this point, but you want to see this as something that you want to address and understand better why it is that you're resistant to the overall change. You know, when people see that you are open not only to their ideas, but helping them to find ways to implement them, they're going to see you as a collaborator and not as an obstacle to overcome. Again, some jobs that might be the actual job. is to poke holes through things and figure out why we should not do that and play that devil's advocate. But as a course of everyday action, it should not be that at first sign of change, your first immediate response is to say no and run the opposite direction. We just don't want to do that. You want to try to build those relationships because you have to work with people every day for quite a bit of time and some more closely than others. So try to make the best of it. Okay. And then finally, um, what if the excuse that you've been repeating is the very thing that's keeping you from your next level? Change the minds of others around you by looking at change differently. You don't have to make it up, okay? Don't make it up, but go in with a list of questions. Go in and be curious. Go in with an open mind so that you can position yourself to continue to move forward and to move upward. You don't want to be the person who's always saying no. So, I want you to think back to a time where you were resistant to change. And maybe there's a situation that's presently going on right now, and you can revisit that and how you approached it and maybe approach it in a different way. I would love to hear about it. So send an email to me, theshanita.brown@gmail.com. I just want to let you know that I appreciate you for taking some time out to listen and have this conversation with me. So I want you to remember that crossroads reveal who you are, catalysts shape who you become. So make it a point to make good choices and to give yourself the opportunity to grow, because that is what's going to stick with you and help you to move forward. Until next time.